there, is liking girls' bums part of partialism? Let's get to it. Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. We are embarking on a truly fascinating deep dive into human biology, evolution, and psychology today. We're taking a mature, highly scientific look at a topic that has quite literally shaped human attraction for millennia. We're going to decode the subconscious cues, the evolutionary survival mechanisms, and the modern psychological conditioning that actually drive physical attraction. It's an incredible journey through our own biology, so get ready to see human nature through a completely different lens.
That question we just opened with, it's honestly a fantastic one. It perfectly bridges the gap between everyday human preferences and clinical psychology, and it's the exact question sparking today's Explainer.
To properly answer that question, we need a roadmap. Number 1, preference versus partialism. Number 2, evolutionary and biological signals. Number 3, the intergluteal cleft. And number 4, understanding anal attraction. Let's get right into it. Section 1, preference versus partialism, establishing a baseline. To really get to the bottom of our opening question, we have to define our terms clearly. In clinical psychology, partialism is defined as a powerful psychological or sexual attraction focused primarily on a specific non-genital body part. So the crucial takeaway here is that because the buttocks are clinically classified as a non-genital body part, an intense primary sexual focus on them absolutely does fall squarely into this clinical category. Okay, let's dive into this. The nuance really lies in distinguishing between these two concepts. A common preference is simply finding certain physical features, like a woman's bum, her face, her hair, or her legs, attractive. That is completely normal and incredibly common. Partialism, on the other hand, is when that specific non-genital body part becomes an overwhelming obsession. It becomes the absolute primary source of sexual interest, completely outweighing other attractions. So simply liking a bum, that's a common preference, but an intense primary sexual focus on it, that is partialism. Moving on to Section 2. Evolutionary and biological signals, survival mechanisms. This brings us to a massive question. Why is this common preference so incredibly universal in the first place? Well, to find out, we have to look at our evolutionary timeline. It's kind of like a giant biological puzzle. Our earliest ancestors were quadrupedal, walking on all fours. But when humans evolved upright bipedalism, meaning we started walking on 2 legs, our anatomy had to change dramatically. To support this new upright posture, the gluteus maximus, or the butt muscle, expanded significantly. It became a very prominent feature. At the exact same time, human mating behavior shifted from quadrupedal positioning to face-to-face or from behind. Because of these structural and behavioral shifts, the backside naturally became a primary visual focal point for human sexual attraction. And this brilliantly illustrates that our attraction isn't just about muscle. It's actually about skeletal architecture. Evolutionary psychology studies reveal a really fascinating detail. Men are deeply, subconsciously attracted to a very specific spinal curvature, exactly 45.5 degrees from the lower back to the buttocks. So why that specific number? Why 45.5? Well, it all comes down to survival. Historically, this exact spinal wedging allowed pregnant women to shift their weight securely over their hips. Without this specific curve, the pressure on a pregnant woman's hips would increase by a staggering 800%. I mean, think about that. An 800% increase in pressure would have made our female ancestors largely immobile, leaving them highly susceptible to severe spinal injuries while just trying to forage for food. So our male ancestors literally evolved to seek out this 45.5-degree curve, which visually presents as a protruding backside, because it meant the woman could safely carry a child and survive the pregnancy. It is primal programming at its absolute finest. But wait, there is even more biology at play here. The distribution of body fat is highly dictated by hormones. Estrogen actually causes fat to store right around the female hips and buttocks. To our ancestors, a rounded backside subconsciously signaled youth, high estrogen levels, and the adequate fat stores needed to sustain a pregnancy. But here is the absolute most mind-blowing part of all this. This specific lower body fat stores something incredibly precious, an omega-3 fat called DHA. The human body doesn't produce DHA on its own, but it is absolutely essential for a baby's rapidly growing brain. The female body specifically stashes this vital brain-building fat in the hips, thighs, and buttocks. So when a man is subconsciously drawn to curvy hips and buttocks, his brain is essentially seeking out a partner with an abundant DHA supply, which research links directly to smarter offspring.
Now that we understand the evolutionary mass and shape, we can look at the specific anatomical framing.
Section 3. The intergluteal cleft, the visual anchor.
The line that divides the buttocks has a specific medical name, the intergluteal cleft. Sometimes it's also called the gluteal or natal cleft. Of course, in everyday language, we hear it jokingly referred to as a butt crack, or, when it's accidentally exposed, a builder's bum or plumber's butt. But biologically speaking, this line acts as a remarkably powerful visual anchor. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how our brain processes this visual anchor. First off, there's visual framing. The cleft naturally accentuates the symmetry, depth, and roundness of the gluteal muscles. In human psychology, symmetry and clear geometric definitions are strongly linked to our internal perceptions of health, genetic fitness, and beauty. Second, there's the taboo factor. Because the intergluteal cleft is generally hidden by clothing in modern society, accidentally or purposefully seeing it triggers a profound psychological response. Our brains thrive on anticipation and the forbidden. Viewing parts of the anatomy that are normally kept private actually triggers the brain to release dopamine, providing a really powerful rush of reward and arousal.
And that brings us to Section 4, Understanding Anal Attraction, Psychological Triggers.
That dopamine rush tied to the taboo naturally brings us to our final layer. While this specific attraction isn't universal for everyone, when it is present, it's generally driven by 3 core pillars. First is pure physiology, nerve endings. The anus and the surrounding perianal skin are densely packed with highly sensitive nerve endings, making it a highly reactive erogenous zone. Second is psychological intimacy. We just talked about the taboo of the cleft, right? Well, engaging with this highly private region amplifies that taboo exponentially. It requires an extreme level of trust and vulnerability between partners. For a lot of people, that feeling of exclusive, guarded intimacy is actually the primary driver of the arousal. And finally, we just cannot ignore media conditioning. Modern pornography and digital media have heavily normalized the focus on the perianal region. This consistent exposure conditions the brain's reward centers, actively training them to associate these specific visual cues with high sexual arousal.
We've covered an immense amount of ground today, from clinical definitions of partialism to the ancient survival mechanics of spinal curves and DHA brain fat, all the way down to modern dopamine triggers. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to consider as you digest all of this information. Look at your own preferences. How much of your attraction do you think is genuinely driven by ancient primal evolutionary hardwiring, and how much of it has been subconsciously conditioned by modern media and the allure of the modern taboo? It is a fascinating balance between biology and psychology. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the science behind human nature.